February 24th, 2022, 4:00 a.m. Kyiv, Ukraine. Russian invasion begins. Multiple axes converging on Ukrainian capital. Northern axis from Belarus. Elite VDV paratroopers. Spetsnaz. Best Russia has. Eastern axis. Mechanized units. Tanks. Artillery. Overwhelming force. Southern approach. Naval infantry. Combined arms. Plan is clear. Surround Kyiv. Capture within 72 hours. Decapitate Ukrainian government. Force capitulation. End war quickly. This is doctrine. This is confident planning. This is assumption of easy victory. Russian command believes Ukrainian government will flee. Military will collapse. Population won't resist. These assumptions will prove catastrophically wrong. But morning of February 24th, Russian forces advance. Confident. Determined. Overwhelming. Kyiv should fall within days. Maximum week. Analysts worldwide agree. Ukrainian capital can't hold against Russian military power. Math is obvious. Numbers favor Russia decisively. This should be quick. This should be certain. This should be over before international response matters. The battle develops. Russian forces advance on Kyiv from 3 directions. Northern axis reaches Hostomel airport. VDV attempts seizure. Fails catastrophically. Eastern axis advances through Chernihiv. Gets bogged down in urban fighting. Southern axis pushes from Kherson. Makes minimal progress toward capital. Everywhere, Ukrainian resistance is fiercer than expected. Better organized. Russian advance is slow. Then stall. Then bogged down completely. Suburban fighting becomes intense. Irpin. Bucha. Hostomel. Every town contested. Every street costs casualties. Russian forces expected rapid advance. Getting grinding urban warfare. Logistics begin failing. 64-kilometer convoy stalls. Supply lines overextended. Maintenance inadequate. Units run short on fuel. On ammunition. On food. Morale drops. Casualties mount. Week 1, Kyiv not captured. Week 2, Kyiv not surrounded. Week 3, Russian forces on defensive. Week 4, situation is critical for Russia. Offensive stalled. Forces exhausted. Casualties catastrophic. No progress towards strategic objectives. International support flows to Ukraine. Western weapons arrive. Ukrainian forces strengthen. Russian forces weaken. Momentum shifts. Decisively. Permanently. At 11:47 p.m. March 29th, 35 days after invasion began, Russian forces begin withdrawing from Kyiv axis. Complete operational withdrawal. Northern axis retreats to Belarus. Eastern axis withdraws toward Russia. All forces abandoning approaches to capital. This isn't tactical repositioning. This is strategic defeat. Russian military attempted to capture Kyiv for 35 days. With elite forces. With overwhelming numbers. Failed completely. Never captured city. Never achieved objectives. Withdrew having accomplished nothing except catastrophic casualties and revealed dysfunction. Battle of Kyiv was Russia's decisive defeat. Proved invasion would fail. Proved Ukrainian military was competent. Proved Russian military was not. Cost Russia strategically, militarily, psychologically. Changed entire war. From expected Russian victory to Ukrainian survival, to Ukrainian counter-offensive capability. All decided in 35 days around Kyiv, where Russian best failed to capture Ukrainian capital, where invasion died, where Russia's strategic defeat became inevitable. This is MilFront. And what happened at Battle of Kyiv wasn't close Ukrainian victory, was comprehensive Russian defeat through multiple simultaneous failures, where elite VDV was destroyed at Hostomel, where 64-kilometer convoy stalled completely, where urban warfare doctrine failed against determined defenders, where logistics couldn't support operations, where command couldn't adapt to resistance, where every assumption proved wrong and every plan failed. For 35 days, Russian forces attacked. For 35 days, Ukrainian forces held. Then Russian forces withdrew. This is decisive. The question isn't whether Kyiv held. Obviously did. Question is why Russian military with overwhelming advantages failed to capture city in 35 days. What combination of Russian failures and Ukrainian successes caused this outcome? And what Battle of Kyiv reveals about modern warfare when plans meet reality and assumptions meet resistance? Official Russian special military operation proceeding according to plan. Week 2. First phase objectives achieved. Not true. Kyiv not captured. Week 3. Focusing on Donbass liberation. Reframing failure as choice. Week 4. Withdrawing from Kyiv axis to concentrate forces. Admitting defeat through euphemism. Final statement. Goodwill gesture. Claiming voluntary withdrawal. Reality was forced retreat. Tactical defeat. Strategic disaster. Statements were propaganda masking catastrophe. Battle of Kyiv was Russian military's comprehensive failure. Statements couldn't hide this. Evidence was obvious. Kyiv stood. Russian forces withdrew. Defeat was complete. Ukrainian statements. Determined throughout. Kyiv will hold. Day after day, week after week. Enemy will be defeated. Confidence despite odds. Final statement after Russian withdrawal. Victory for Ukrainian defenders. Accurate. Earned. Costly. But complete. Kyiv held. Russia failed. Ukrainian forces proved capable. Proved determined. Proved that right strategy with motivated troops defeats wrong strategy with demoralized invaders. Kyiv victory was Ukrainian military's finest moment. Defined war. Proved survival. Enabled resistance. Statements reflected earned pride. Stay with me, because the detail that explains Kyiv failure, why 35 days weren't enough, is going to show you that Russian planning assumed Ukrainian collapse. Government would flee. Military plans reflected these assumptions. Light logistics. Minimal ammunition. Parade uniforms for occupation. This planning failed immediately when Ukrainians fought. Government stayed. Military fought professionally. Population resisted everywhere. Russian forces had plans for quick victory, no plans for sustained combat. When combat continued, plans became useless. Logistics failed. Tactics failed. Strategy failed. Everything failed because fundamental assumption, Ukrainian collapse, was wrong. 35 days proved this comprehensively. Russian military's planning was based on fantasy. Reality destroyed plans. Ukrainian determination destroyed invasion. Kyiv battle decided this. Proved Russian military couldn't adapt, couldn't sustain, couldn't win. 35 days was enough time to prove inevitability of failure. Let's establish what Battle of Kyiv actually was, how it unfolded, why Russia failed. Strategic situation. Kyiv is Ukrainian capital. Population 2.8 million. Political center. Command center. Capturing Kyiv theoretically ends war. Russian planning assumed this. Focused massive force on capital. 3 axes. Northern from Belarus. Most direct route. 50 kilometers. Elite VDV airborne. Spetsnaz special forces. Should seize airport. Enable air bridge. Land reinforcements. Capture city quickly. Eastern axis through Chernihiv. Mechanized forces. Armor. Artillery. Standard combined arms. Should advance rapidly. Surround from east. Southern approach from Kherson. Naval infantry. Support element or complete encirclement. All 3 axes advancing simultaneously. Ukrainian forces defending, regular army. Territorial defense. Highly motivated. Well led. Adequately equipped. Determined to hold capital. Against overwhelming odds. This is David versus Goliath. Should be no contest. Was contest. Decisive contest. Week 1, Feb 24, Ma 2. Russian offensive. Northern Axis attacks Hostomel. VDV destroyed. Airport contested, not captured. 64-kilometer convoy advances. Stalls completely. Suburbs engaged. Irpin, Bucha. Heavy fighting. Ukrainian forces defend professionally. Trade space for time. Inflict casualties. Delay advance. Russian forces expected collapse. Getting battle. Logistics begin straining. Supply lines extended. Maintenance inadequate. Eastern Axis attacks through Chernihiv. City resists. Urban fighting begins. Progress minimal. Casualties heavy. Southern Axis makes little progress. Ukrainian defenses hold. Week 1 assessment. Russian offensive stalled. Kyiv not captured. Not surrounded. Still functioning. Russian plans failing. Week 2, Mar 3-9. Grinding warfare. Northern suburbs are battlefield. Block by block. Building by building. Casualties mount both sides. Russian advantages in numbers and firepower matter less in urban terrain. Ukrainian forces use terrain. Local knowledge. Motivation. Inflict disproportionate casualties. Russian advances measured in meters, not kilometers. Eastern Axis still fighting. Russian forces can't bypass without leaving threat. Can't capture without unacceptable casualties. Stalemate. Southern Axis makes no progress toward Kyiv. Ukrainian defenses too strong. Week 2 assessment. Russian offensive failed. Kyiv secure. Russian forces exhausted. Logistics critical. No breakthrough possible with current forces and methods. Week 3. Mare. 10-16 Russian defensive. Offensive capability lost. Forces consolidate. Attempt to hold gains. Ukrainian counterattacks begin. Testing Russian positions. Finding weaknesses. Exploiting. Northern suburbs see Ukrainian advances. Recapturing territory. Russian forces withdrawing from forward positions. Eastern Axis retreating from Chernihiv approaches. City will not fall. Russian command recognizes this. Southern Axis static. Making no progress. Week 3 assessment. Russian forces defeated operationally. Can't advance. Can barely hold. Ukrainian forces gaining momentum. Initiative shifting. Week 4-5, Mar 17 to 29. Ukrainian ascendant. Counter-offensives expand. Northern suburbs being liberated. Irpin, Bucha, others, Russian. Forces withdrawing. Sometimes orderly. Sometimes chaotic. Eastern Axis withdrawing completely from Chernihiv Axis. Southern approaches see no Russian progress. Entire Kyiv operation is failing. Visibly. Publicly. Irreversibly. March 29th, Russian command orders withdrawal. Complete. All forces. All axes. Retreat to borders. Battle of Kyiv over. Now the analysis. Why Russia failed. What this means. Planning based on false assumptions. Russian command assumed Ukrainian government would flee. Didn't. Military would collapse. Didn't. Population wouldn't resist. Did. Every assumption wrong. Plans reflected assumptions. Light logistics for quick operation. Minimal ammunition for brief combat. Parade uniforms for occupation. When Ukrainians fought, plans were useless. Russian military had no contingency for sustained resistance. When got sustained resistance, couldn't adapt. Stuck executing failed plans. Because no alternatives prepared. This is planning failure. Strategic failure. Caused operational defeat. Logistics inadequacy. Russian military's logistics can't support sustained operations far from railheads. Kyiv was 80+ kilometers from Belarus border, within range theoretically. But Ukrainian demolitions destroyed bridges, blocked roads, extended supply lines. Russian logistics collapsed under operational demands. 64-kilometer convoy stalled. Fuel shortages crippled operations. Ammunition rationing began week 2. Food shortages by week 3. Maintenance failure throughout. Logistics failure made tactical failure inevitable. Can't fight without supplies. Supplies didn't reach. Fighting failed. Urban warfare failure. Russian forces struggled in urban terrain. Doctrine emphasizes firepower. Overwhelming destruction.
Works in Grozny or Aleppo against weak defenders.
Doesn't work against competent defenders with international audience watching. Ukrainian forces used urban terrain expertly. Ambushes. Prepared positions. Civilian shields, involuntary. Civilians stayed. Russian forces couldn't use full firepower without international condemnation. Couldn't advance without firepower. Stalemate favoured defenders. Time favoured Ukraine. Russian forces bled. Ukrainian forces strengthened. Urban warfare doctrine failed. Ukrainian military competence. Ukrainian forces fought far better than Russian planning assumed. Training was adequate. Leadership was good. Motivation was exceptional. Equipment was sufficient. Tactics were sound. Western intelligence provided situational awareness. Anti-tank weapons destroyed Russian armor. Anti-air weapons contested airspace. Artillery struck Russian positions. Drones provided reconnaissance. Combined arms defense worked. Ukrainian military was competent professional force. Russian planning didn't account for this. Paid price. International support impact. Western weapons flowed to Ukraine during battle. Javelins, Stingers, ammunition, intelligence, financial support, sanctions on Russia, all accumulated, strengthened Ukraine, weakened Russia. Battle of Kyiv bought time for this support. Each day Kyiv held was day more support arrived. Each day Russian forces bled. By week 4, Ukrainian forces stronger than invasion start. Russian forces weaker. This shift was decisive. Enabled counteroffensive. Ensured defeat. 3 questions from the beginning. Time to answer them. Why did Russian military with overwhelming advantages fail to capture Kyiv in 35 days? Multiple failures. Planning based on false assumptions. Logistics inadequate for sustained operations. Urban warfare doctrine failed against competent defenders. Elite forces misused and destroyed. Command couldn't adapt to reality. All combined. Plus Ukrainian competence. Ukrainian determination. International support. Created perfect conditions for Russian defeat. 35 days was enough to prove this comprehensively. Every Russian advantage proved insufficient. Every Ukrainian disadvantage proved manageable. Battle decided war's trajectory. Russian failure at Kyiv meant invasion failed. Everything after was consequence. What combination of Russian failures and Ukrainian successes caused this? Russian false assumptions. Logistics failure. Tactical incompetence. Command rigidity. Troop demoralization. Ukrainian military competence. Strategic intelligence. Tactical flexibility. Population support. International assistance. Combination was decisive. Russian failures would have been exploitable by a competent defender. Ukrainian successes would have been irrelevant against a competent attacker. Together, created comprehensive Russian defeat. Kyiv proved this. 35 days of battle. Every day Russian failures accumulated. Every day Ukrainian successes multiplied. Result was inevitable. Defeat. What does Battle of Kyiv reveal about modern warfare? That plans based on assumptions rather than intelligence fail catastrophically. That logistics determines outcomes more than combat power. That urban warfare favours determined defenders with adequate equipment. That international support can decisively shift battlefield balance. That military competence matters more than numerical superiority. That strategic surprise alone doesn't guarantee victory. That modern wars require sustained capability, not just initial shock. Battle of Kyiv revealed all of this. Through Russian failure. Through Ukrainian success. Through 35 days of warfare that changed everything. The lesson from Battle of Kyiv is decisive. Wars aren't won by plans. Wars are won by adaptation to reality. Russian plans assumed easy victory. Reality was determined resistance. Russian military couldn't adapt. Plans failed. Operations failed. Strategy failed. Invasion failed. All from failure to adapt. Ukrainian forces adapted constantly. Learned Russian tactics. Countered effectively. Exploited weaknesses. Used strengths. Won battle.
One operationally, one strategically. 35 days proved who could adapt wins. Who can't adapt loses. Russian military couldn't adapt. Ukrainian military could. Battle of Kyiv result was determined. Ukraine survived. Russia failed. Invasion became unwinnable. All in 35 days around Kyiv, where history turned. This is MilFront.
Battle of Kyiv defined Russia-Ukraine war. 35 days of fighting decided everything. Russian failure to capture capital proved invasion would fail. Ukrainian success in holding capital proved survival was possible. Everything after was working out implications. Russian forces were superior on paper, failed in reality. Ukrainian forces were inferior numerically, superior operationally. Battle proved this, comprehensively, decisively, permanently.
Kyiv held. Russia withdrew. War turned. From expected Russian victory to Ukrainian resistance to eventual Ukrainian territorial gains. All because Battle of Kyiv proved Russian military's systemic failures couldn't overcome Ukrainian military's competence and determination. 35 days changed.
Everything. Proved plans don't win wars. Logistics matter. Adaptation matters. Determination matters. Competence matters. Russian military lacked these. Ukrainian military had these. Battle result reflected this. Kyiv stood. Russia failed. War decided. Subscribe to MilFront. Because understanding modern warfare requires understanding why Battle of Kyiv matters. Russian military attacked Ukrainian capital with overwhelming force. Elite troops. Best equipment. Complete surprise. Should have won. Lost comprehensively. Why? Planning based on fantasy. Logistics inadequate. Tactics inappropriate. Adaptation impossible. Ukrainian forces countered. Held. Won. Not through miracle. Through competence. Through adaptation. Battle of Kyiv teaches this. Professional military with motivated population defeats larger force with broken logistics and rigid command. 35 days proved this. Russian forces couldn't take Kyiv. Withdrew defeated. Everything after followed from this. Ukrainian survival. Russian failure. War's trajectory. All determined at Kyiv. In 35 days, where modern warfare lessons were written. In blood. In ruins. In victory and defeat. Battle of Kyiv matters. Should be studied. Will be studied. Shows clearly that numbers alone don't determine outcomes. Competence. Logistics. Adaptation. Determination. These determine outcomes. Kyiv proved this. 35 days. Decisively. Permanently. 35 days. 3 axes. Thousands of casualties. Kyiv held. Russia failed. Strategic defeat complete. Not tactical. Strategic. Russian military attempted most important operation. Failed comprehensively. Couldn't capture capital. Couldn't surround. Couldn't break defense. Withdrew defeated. This failure decided war. Proved invasion unwinnable. Proved Russian military incapable. Proved Ukrainian military competent. Proved Western support effective. All in 35 days. Battle of Kyiv was Russia's decisive defeat. Ukraine's decisive victory. War's turning point. Where invasion died. Where resistance proved possible. Where everything changed. From assumed Russian victory to Ukrainian survival to eventual Ukrainian gains. Battle of Kyiv decided this. 35 days of warfare. Where modern military history turned. Where lessons were written for decades. Where Russian military's weakness was revealed. Where Ukrainian military's strength was proved. Where war's outcome was determined. Not finished, but determined. Kyiv held. Russia failed. Everything else followed. This is Battle of Kyiv. This is decisive defeat. This is strategic turning point. This is MilFront analysis. Permanent. Clear. True. Real battles. Real tactics. Real consequences. Stay informed.